And there it is. Metaphor ReFantazio. Oh, so good. I just got done watching the Atlus Exclusive Showcase for Metaphor ReFantazio, and I'm blown away by just how much information we're able to derive from just the initial trailer in and of itself. And so I want to do a quick comb through and a breakdown on everything we've learned from this first trailer, just on a first kind of pass through. And so if you like Metaphor content, if you're excited for the game as well, check out some of my other videos on Metaphor. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, and let's just jump into it.
I truly believed that I might end the strife and discrimination that plagued our people across 9 endless years.
A land grotesque as its people.
Okay, first off, Luis, I feel like you might be the grotesque one here. You might be beautiful with your luscious blonde hair on the outside. I feel like you might be the grotesque one. I think at the beginning of that trailer, just based on what Luis is saying here and what he's about to say, I believe that first voice that we hear is the king himself. You know, it is his goal to kind of, you know, squelch some of the discrimination that is kind of plaguing the United Kingdom of Euchronia. And Luis is probably of the mindset that maybe a little bit of discrimination is good. You know, a very elitist, very classist kind of mindset. We know in this game that we're going to be dealing with a lot of prejudice surrounding, you know, tribal relations and discrimination against people like the protagonist, who's part of a lesser tribe, and, you know, the church, who I think Luis is a part of, just because he has that very kind of priestly, like very, for lack of a better term, kind of like Catholic deacon kind of vibe to him. And so I'm interested to see if he is just like a full representative of the church in and of itself, or if he's just kind of dressed like someone who might be part of the Sanctus Church in this kind of world, and he doesn't actually have any kind of like relation to them, even though we do know that the church plays a large role in the United Kingdom of Euchronia, just based on past things that have been mentioned in other videos and trailers and all of that.
Speak of the old vulture's last grasp at power.
And there it is.
The tournament.
Also, right here, I'm going to scroll back. Right here in the Gauntlet Runner, looks like the engine room. So the engine room looks interesting because it is essentially powered by a heart, for lack of a better term. It's almost like a mix of organic material and like a mechanical being. I'm really curious to see how that operates, because we know with the archetypes themselves, to summon your archetype, you need to, you know, grasp your heart and pull it out of your chest. So what is the correlation, if there is one, between the Gauntlet Runner and archetypes, or humans in general? Well, humans in general in this kind of world. And another thing on this screen that I think is really cool and really interesting is that we see kind of like this wardrobe icon in the center of this room. And so that makes me wonder, are we going to be able to have like a change of clothes besides just like cosmetic stuff, right? Because we know that there are cosmetics for the character to be able to change, because we saw in the collector's edition that you can wear, you know, the Persona and the Shin Megami Tensei characters like school uniforms, and those are cosmetics that will come with the collector's edition of the game when that eventually kind of releases. So we know that there will be cosmetic changes to the character, but could those have impact on gameplay, right? So I'm really interested to see if the standard outfit of the protagonist is just that kind of like white pea coat looking thing, or if we'll be able to get a lot of different wardrobe options for the entire cast throughout the course of the game, or if that's just kind of gonna be sequestered to DLC. But all right, continuing forward. And so here is the war room. And I think that this area is really interesting because obviously we see many of our party members just kind of hanging out in this room kind of as we're traveling from place to place, or maybe we're parked here in Martira, but this is kind of where we are going to come back and decide, okay, where are we going next? What are we doing? It looks like we are able to upgrade like a royal virtue, or maybe that's the bond system with Stroll there. And so I'm really interested to see how we are able to interact with everyone and do everything within the Gauntlet Runner itself. They revealed that we are going to be able to do a lot of stuff in the Gauntlet Runner as we travel from place to place. But something I'm more interested in this, obviously the vault. I think that's probably where the pilot is going to be at, and where he's going to be controlling the Gauntlet Runner from, or maybe that's where we have goodies, whatever it might be. But down here at the bottom, I just want to go through every little kind of option that is available. So we have the Royal Virtues, those are essentially our social skills in the game. A map, easy enough. Popularity ranking, that's cool that we can kind of have that gauge. It's kind of what they were kind of sort of doing with the fan site in Persona 5, but this just looks like a much more robust way of doing that. And while that was much more like plot progression inspired, I wonder if this will actually be connected with our actions and how many followers we're able to kind of connect with and work with throughout the course of the game. So that's interesting. I hope our actions influence that popularity ranking, and it's not just something that naturally goes up because you progress the plot enough. We got our menu, Traveler's Voices, which I would have to assume is just kind of the game's in-game system for like the online functionalities. What are people doing on each day? How's that kind of working? So memorandum, like probably just kind of going through like a diary, or what's happened up to this point. And then requests and followers. It's pretty straightforward, but a lot of information. And the UI, well, it's Atlus, so can't really be surprised that it's very sleek. But okay, moving forward. All right, I'm stopping again really quickly because this is really an interesting scene because it shows us probably how many party members we're actually going to have. And so we can see, Stroll, Hulkenberg, Heis, protagonist, Gallica, who's essentially the navigator, and our good friend who's piloting the Gauntlet Runner. We can see everyone there, but there are 3 empty seats. Now, one of those seats is probably going to go to Juna, right? The second seat is probably going to go to Yufa, who we've seen in a couple trailers with the 3 eyes. And the third one is going to be this elderly gentleman who we have seen not only showcased in the scene in the mines in a previous trailer, but also on the cover of the heckin' game. And so even though we see him a little bit later in the trailer kind of looming over Hulkenberg, I think he's going to be another one of our party members, even if he's like a temporary party member. Who comes and goes every now and then, and maybe we'll have a couple party members who kind of like come and go throughout the course of the game. But he seems like, while it looks like he's the one that like attacked Hulkenberg in a later scene that we'll see here in just a second, I think he's actually kind of like a mentor figure and kind of saved her from herself. And so I'm really excited to see who the later party members are going to be. And we can also see that our pilot is actually part of the Ishkia tribe. You can see it with his wings that are kind of coming out from beneath his coat. And I think that that's really interesting because the Ishkia tribe is typically more associated with being like a very regal tribe full of like scholars and having such a large presence in like those bigger cities. and in intellectual kinds of works. And not to say that, running and manning and probably being a mechanic for this Gauntlet Runner single-handedly isn't very scholarly, but it's just kind of, he seems more of like a scallywag, he seems like a pirate to a certain extent. Definitely rough around the edges. He doesn't give, regal kinds of vibes like this Ishkia tribe member that has been shown in previous stuff before. So I really am curious to learn more about him too. And then we can see here the route on the map, request tactics, and check status probably of everyone. Just kind of like a safe room in Persona.
So, summing up, our first trial is to slay a monster.
And here is really interesting because we can see that different places on the map can have different weather statuses, which is really cool. But what I think is even cooler is that as you're traveling, we learn that you travel in, not real time, but like you have to take travel time. And that's when you do all of your stuff in your Gauntlet Runner. So connecting with your party members, all of that kind of stuff. And so we can see us traveling from Martyra to this tomb here, and it's fine everywhere except it's rainy at the tomb. And along our route, we will see different Gauntlet Runners, which I imagine to be the Gauntlet Runners of, different king candidates or different people who are going for king. It could just be travelers. Maybe some are salesmen, some are merchants, whatever it might be. But we will probably be running into different Gauntlet Runners on our path from place to place. And so that'll be a dynamic as well as how long will it take to get from place to place, but also, is it worthwhile to take this specific route because you're going to run into another Gauntlet Runner, which may lead them to kind of raid you, because we can see Gauntlet Runners getting into fights in this scene in this previous trailer. But for this, we're going to the abandoned tomb to fulfill this kind of quest.
Sounds like we've lost a few candidates already too. Poor bastards went after something too nasty for their head.
So I really love this dialogue that's just kind of like happening around you. I love flavor text like this because, riding sword looks like somebody wants attention. It's not usual that people are just going to be riding swords. This is not something that someone does every day in this town. Martyra looks not quite as affluent as a place like Grand Trad, and so I'm really interested to see what the different cultures of each different town is going to look like, and kind of like the cultural makeup of it, because it looks like right here we can see someone from the Parapos tribe, the Beastman tribe, right? But what is more interesting is right over here. We can see this kind of spectral figure, right? Now, we see him a bit more closely, but they never address it in the wider showcase, right? And so that right there is our man, our myth, our legend, Seeker Supreme himself, as I am so affectionately dubbed him in a previous video. He's the one that's going to take us to academia. And so it looks like he also shows up in the Gauntlet Runner. He shows up pretty much everywhere you go that's like a settlement or like a safe zone, it looks like. And so I think he is essentially going to be acting like this game's version of the Velvet Room. Academia is the Velvet Room, and he acts as kind of like a 1-2 combo deal of like Igor and like the twins, or Igor and Theodore, which is so cool because I guess talking to him, that's how you're going to be able to connect with and upgrade your archetypes. And since he's kind of a spectral figure, I wonder if he kind of exists kind of in between worlds. Igor exists between, being awake and being asleep. He kind of exists between the real world and this United Kingdom of Euchronia is what I would have to take a guess, which is why he is so privy to so much knowledge. He has these, walls and walls of books, whereas here in the United Kingdom of Euchronia, books are a little bit more taboo. They're harder to come by, it looks like. And so that's really interesting. I imagine in this world, books are for the wealthy, and the lower class, like our protagonist here, has to scrounge to kind of get some of that knowledge, controlling the minds of the peoples. But so a lot to take in this one kind of screenshot. We can see something over here. It looks like something where you can upgrade maybe or use one of your royal virtues. I'm not sure what this water salesman or whatever it might be. This kind of looks like someone who would be scrying, or maybe they sell magic. But really, really interesting. This place used to be a busy little hubbub, but thanks to all the crimes, it's turned into this. So people talking about how, just in general, Martira used to be a nice castle town, but as we've kind of established, it has declined rapidly because of the crimes of the world, the prejudice, all of the terrible things kind of going on.
Poor bastards went after something.
Okay. This is interesting because this shows us, it says Heis, nefarious kidnapper. Heis is one of our party members. So one of the quests we need to do is to bring in Heis. Heis is described as a notorious criminal tied to a series of kidnappings in Martira. Despite his bounty, he has evaded capture, and his true identity remains a mystery. And they have him kind of like blurred out. That's crazy. So our goal is probably going to be to go to this old tomb. We'll find Heis, discover he's, a member of the Ugif tribe. Probably isn't the kidnapper. It's probably been pinned on him, even though he is kind of like a thief. He's a criminal. His archetype just straight off the bat is thief. So that's really cool that within all of these other bounties that are monster, Heis is one of them. And that tells me that there will be other characters. It's not just going to be monsters that will have bounties out on their head. There will also be characters. And that's such a blink and you miss it moment before they move on to this like giant worm looking thing that
Too nasty for their headhunt.
A land full of feral humans.
And then a land full of feral humans. So they're all over the place. Humans are all over the place. And, we've been calling them homos and ningen. It sounds like they're just calling them humans in reality. So we can put those kind of terms to rest and just call them humans at this point, which humans are the monsters in this world. The peoples of this world are not humans. Humans are the monsters, which is pretty on the nose, I guess, since our reality is their utopia. The world that humans actually exist in is their utopia, which, the grass is always greener, right? In reality, humans are monsters.
With people either running.
And then looking through, weapon shop, nothing crazy here. All of this is happening in the same day, though. I think that's interesting, that all of this is happening, depart from Martira in 9 days.
We're going mad.
What do we believe in, really?
I just like this screenshot. Also, it does show that there are going to be attacks very explicitly. And I think it's funny that he just kind of pops out of his pod, which they even described in the showcase as being those Japanese pod hotels. And that's directly what this kind of setup was inspired by, which I think is really fun and cool. A mausoleum. Ooh, here we go. So, we're in a different spot now. We are in the Verga Island. The Dragon Temple is in somewhere called the Verga Island. And we can see that we have Heis now, we have a little bit better stats, but as you defeat enemies, there are a lot of different things that you are obtaining, right? You get your standard EXP, which is, you know, your EXP to level up the different characters, but you also get your archetype EXP, which is so cool, because it feels very much, and they even called archetypes jobs, right? So it feels very similar to like a Final Fantasy V kind of job system where obviously you're leveling yourself up and that'll boost your stats, but also you're leveling up your archetypes as you go. And I'm wondering if, like in something like Final Fantasy V, if what archetypes you focus on, that whether that will affect your holistic stats and your character growth as a whole. And so that you can like focus on very specific jobs as you build up to build your characters each way that you kind of want them to be. Because there is a lot of customizability with the jobs. They mentioned that if you wanted everyone to be a brawler, you could make everyone a brawler. If you want 2 people to be healers, a warrior, and a thief, then you could do that. So there is a lot of very pronounced customizability in terms of the job system or the archetype system for you to be able to level all of these up for each individualized character, which is awesome. Now, money's pretty straightforward. You use it to buy things, but the mag or the magla is really cool because I'm wondering if this is something that you use to level up your magical tools or your magical abilities, or if this is just a separate kind of system in which you are using those magical stuff, right? Because magic isn't like in most games in this. Magic is kind of a rarity, I suppose, and is much more kind of controlled. Now, we are kind of the exception to the rule here, right? We're able to use kind of that heretical magic because we've unlocked those archetypes. But I'm curious to see how that magla or that mag kind of currency or experience is used to upgrade our characters moving forward so that maybe our magic can be kind of stronger. Because the archetype experience is probably going to go into that skill tree. But we see the action combat, that's just kind of going into the squad combat.
You're in this race to become king, are you?
Okay, so that is not Luis talking. I imagine it's the old gentleman that's kind of standing over Hulkenberg that's going to be shown here in a second. I'm fascinated as to why we are having, an audience with Luis. I think we're probably gaining a little bit too much notoriety, and he is less than pleased. Also, his 2 retainers in this scene are the 2 people who earlier in the trailer were talking about, like, what do we even believe in? I'm wondering if they're actually, people who want to be serving him, or if they're more so kind of slaves to his cause, or indentured servants at the very least. I also think it's strange that his horns they almost look charred at the very end. I don't know. He's given major antagonist vibes, but I guess, we'll have to see. Maybe he could not be the main antagonist, but I'm not entirely convinced of that.
Not exactly.
I'd treat all tribes equally.
Treating all tribes equally. It's very noble.
Each ally of a different tribe. Fascinating. Each ally of a different tribe.
First off, Luis saying, each ally of a different tribe. Fascinating. Racist. The worst. But I do think it's cool just seeing these kind of character sheets, essentially. Looking at the different stats. Seems pretty straightforward RPG stuff. Strength, magic, energy, agility, and luck. And so, pretty cool, pretty straightforward. You can see the archetypes they have equipped, but nothing too crazy. And we can see that essentially we've been looking at them at like level 33, so that they have a good amount of stuff associated with them. But I do think that this is a pretty fun, pretty interesting kind of like almost like diagram-esque, like Leonardo da Vinci looking kind of character sheet. So
Fascinating.
we can see him fighting as a brawler there.
Fear and anxiety. They always lead the people astray.
I think there. Hold on. I think here. Let's try and grab that.
The people astray.
Him talking about anxiety leading people astray, right? It looks like he just took down a massive monster, and he's being real smug about it, because look at that massive beast in the back there. I think that he just, in front of everyone, in front of all of those people, he either brought this to show people, or he defeated it himself. I think that that's a gigantic monster, right? And that's how he's kind of peacocking his strength and his kind of right to the throne.
This place.
Gotta have the close-up of the eye.
If that's the real world, then it can die alongside you.
See, that's really interesting. If this is the real world, it can die alongside you. I wonder if they see our world and they're like, no, this is not what we wanted. And so maybe instead of them trying to find the real world, maybe the Utopia is what Luis is trying to aspire to, and he is trying to get everyone to go to this like higher plane of existence, and kind of by force through his kingdom. And maybe our protagonist, our party, sees it and is like, no, we want our reality. And this world that you're trying to thrust upon us, that they have seen through Seeker Supreme, is fully undesirable, which I can't really blame them for that. But we see some more archetype fights, which is awesome. Beautiful transitions.
Traces to the gallows, not just us.
And here, the royal funeral draws ever closer. So this is the prince. And so with every day that passes, it looks like instead of just like a calendar system, like in, in Persona 5 Royal, where it's like the cityscape and then, it throws the knife at it when the day changes. When the day changes here, we see the stakes. This is the stakes for the protagonist. They will officially pronounce his dear friend, who is cursed, to be dead. And it looks like a lot of the evil magic in this world has that purplish hue. We just saw Luis having that purplish hue to him. We see these kind of maleficent looking vines surrounding the prince kind of coming out of him, which we've seen in other trailers. And so the stakes will always be the prince and his curse, because the protagonist doesn't want to be king. He wants to earn that title so he can probably give it back to the prince, who he believes to be the rightful heir, because they're friends, Also, notably, we can't tell what race or what tribe the prince is from. It's very unapparent, and I'm wondering if he is from the same tribe as the protagonist. I wonder if the king and the prince are formerly of the Elda tribe. I don't know. I don't know what other kind of tribe looks similar to the prince there. That looks like a normal kind of like human, so to speak. Unless there's something like maybe he's hiding wings, but I don't think that's the case.
Any innocent folks he doesn't.
Oh, and here's the Necromancer. And I'm wondering if the Necromancer is one of the people or like a lackey of whomever put the curse on the prince, because we can see this kind of thorn-esque magic in his clothing and coming from him. This is more red, as he's creating these zombified Clemmer tribes people, but And we can see that he's part of the Matsutari tribe because he has that third eye there. And so maybe because he has a third eye and a horn, he's, half Matsutari and half Clemar. I don't know. Really interesting.
Find useful.
It is a new dawn, and it's
Because he does look like one of the major threats in the game as he summons those kind of skeletons. And we can see the dope archetypes. And this council with this dude who it screams like secondary antagonist, or maybe he's pulling the strings of Luis. I'm not sure. But they do talk about Luis's meddling. He's more of an annoyance to them than anything. So I wonder if he, even though he's like an annoyance to them, if they are kind of feeling the squeeze of his antics and he's going to grow in power far beyond kind of what they had planned. And so even though they feel like the council in the shadows that are actually running everything and who are working against the king all the while, but he was kind of the figurehead who was just trying to keep things okay. They are now seeing that Luis is actually kind of a threat to them because he's a rogue agent, right? And now we have Seeker Supreme here with his little quill and his little notebook, and he is living between worlds. I feel so strongly about it because of that lantern in the back, that green light. In something like Legend of Zelda, when you think about Pose or those spirits of the dead, right? We see those greenish blue lights, and maybe I'm pulling too much Legend of Zelda into this and it's flavoring my text, but and it's flavoring my opinion. But because we see him as a ghost in so many places, we see him as a ghost in the Gauntlet Runner and in the different towns, even though they don't really pay much attention to it in this trailer or this showcase, I think that he is existing in between realities, and he and academia as a whole is the only reason that we are able to kind of like act against the forces that be, really. And he is the one that teaches us and helps us to learn more about these archetypes.
Clear my head of these fantasies. In the end, clinging to...
And here he is. Hulkenberg is talking about clinging to these fantasies and how that's kind of foolish, right? I think this man is not the person who struck her down. I think he found her and nursed her back to health, and that he is going to be, if not a party member, then at least a mentor figure for a time being and one of our staunch allies who comes from, a higher social standing, but he has a strong sense of knightly justice.
To a dream will do me no good.
Crazy hair.
All this, I shall claim the ideals you abandoned and finish it in your stead.
Ah! The book! So, Luis is not saying that. He's not claiming anyone's ideals. He's the worst, I imagine. But I think he's looking through the book because he cherishes this utopia that we also, at one point, cherished. Because that's the exact same book that we as the protagonist, we keep seeing him read. And so I think that they are two sides of the same coin. I think that he kind of lusts after this utopia, and we see it as, a nice fairy tale and a nice thing to aspire to, but we need to bring the utopia to our world instead of escaping to it. And so I think that the duality between Luis and the protagonist is going to be the most interesting part of the game, because they are as opposite can be, with Luis being from a very high social standing, having a lot of resources to his name, and, not building bonds with anyone. He is a monolithic figure that has a bunch of power all of his own, and he is going to become king of his own strength and of his own accord, and that is going to help him go to the utopia whether people follow him or not, right? He is going to muscle his way and use his status to become king, whereas we as the protagonists aren't doing it because we want to become king. We want to do it to help our friend, and we are going to create bonds with so many different people to kind of raise us up into that kingly status. We are going to develop those followers. And so the philosophies on how to become king are going to become as different as possible, even though they kind of share the same end goal or the same dreams of that little book that they both have. And I think that that's really cool that one person kind of ties into that idea of Hegelian dialectic, where you have, your ideas, other people's ideas that conflict with yours, that thesis and that antithesis, and then they conflict with one another. And through that, conflict, they synthesize into a newer, higher understanding of the world, right? And that's how our character is going to grow, through his archetypes that help him grow, and because he's gaining all of these new perspectives, whereas Luis will only ever care about his own perspective. And so while he is very strong inherently, I would have to imagine he won't be able to grow to the level that the protagonist is, and that's where the conflict is going to kind of arise. Think of it, I hate to compare it to My Hero Academia, but think of it as like an all for one versus a one for all kind of situation. And that is going to be a really interesting dynamic and kind of rivalry to see play out through the course of the game, as he kind of realizes that this insignificant little Elder tribe member is actually the greatest threat that he could possibly have, and that will infuriate him because he's, he is racist, he's classist, he is all of the ists, right? He's the worst. And maybe he'll change and there will be a higher villain or god or whatever that we have to fight. Or maybe he'll just be the main antagonist. And I kind of like that more ground level, like he is the threat, or someone human or humanoid, I suppose, is the threat, not something like the homos or the humans, I guess. But, and there it is. Metaphor ReFantazio. Oh, so good. And October 11th. October 11th is the promised day. And then we get sights of, I like how all of the Gauntlet Runners are different. I like all of these different sceneries. I think that crystalline area is really cool. I like that we can see Yufa and Juna in the party in these kind of scenes. I am curious as to when they're gonna give them like full portraits, because I don't think that they're just gonna be like companions that are with the party for a small time. I guess you never know. But the lush scenery and the varied kind of locales of this game are going to be incredible, because for Persona 5, initially they wanted to be like a world-traveling adventure, and that was one of their ideas. But then they made it very, Japan-centric in the wake of a tragedy in Japan, and which I think is spectacular. But this is their romp through the world, right? But now it's a world that Hashino and his team have created themselves, so they can make it whatever they want it to be. And it is, I'm so excited to be able to explore this kind of world and see, what are all of these locales, where these foods that we're going to be making, what are these statues about, right? And the score is incredible. Travel beyond fantasy. And here's everything. We can see all of the costumes and the background music set. We can see all of the personas, and it looks like that might be Unicorn Overlord at the very end here, which I think is really cool. I love that there's a map. I'm also fascinated by what this abomination of a squid is going to be, because that's something. And then we have the homotenta, which are the little teeth that are gonna be enemies or mascots or whatever it might be. And that's kind of this first trailer. I'm sure that there are things that I have missed and I have not broken down to the fullest that they can be, but I think that this did cover a fair bit, and I'm going to be looking a lot at this trailer and the rest of the showcase, which has a lot more stuff in it, so that I can make more videos and make sure that we cover this game in its entirety up to its release. So if you want to see more Metaphor content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and why not even ring that notification bell. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, and why not even a fantastic rest of your month. And I will see you in the next video. Later.